So when approaching database cases for COMM335, we will mostly be using ERDPlus as our main software. So to ensure you do well on exam questions and homework regarding ERDPlus, we're going to narrow down our approach to these questions to a reliable and memorable approach. Now, the basic approach to database case questions will be to check your ERs. Entities, attributes, relationships. If we list out everything we need before we proceed to even make our ERD and then generate the relational schema and SQL, the chances of you getting the question wrong are a lot lower. So our approach will be as follows. Number one is to list out the database entities, attributes, and relationships from the case. Number two will be to check the ERD diagram and make sure that we have represented what we've listed out properly. Number three will be to define your variables within the relational schema to match the data types that we want to convey in SQL. And then number four will be to double check your logic once you've gotten your generated SQL and make sure that it lines up with what your relational schema says. Now, when you first read the case, you'll run into a lot of information. The best way to get everything down is to scan through the text for categorical and quantitative variables, or any pieces of information or identifiers that the company is collecting that makes sense to track. So passages like each customer signs up for an account with their email, age, as well as their first and last name. Well, we want to collect a customer's email, age, first name, and last name as variables. So the email, age, first name, and last name are the attributes you want to collect, and the customer is the entity you're tracking. Going through each passage in the case and tracking down the attributes and entities and displaying them like so will make sure that when you go to create your ERD, you won't miss any crucial information. Furthermore, watch out for passages in the case that read like this. Each order is made by a customer and tracks the payment and location that the order was made at. Well, if we're tracking the customer, payment, and location under the order entity, well, we would need to somehow reference the customer ID, payment ID, and location ID as foreign keys so that we can keep track of it within the order object. Marking down these relationships in a format like this will help you keep track of the relationships between entities when we go to make the ERD. So now that you've created your entity relationship diagram, it helps to check the logic of all the variables before you move on to your relational schema. That means double checking the cardinality or relationships between the entities, as well as the specific properties of the attributes, like IDs being unique and some attributes being optional or multi-valued, and so on and so forth. In this ERD, you can see that all the entities are correctly linked together. We make sure that the relationships between the entities are correct. So a location can have one manager and a manager can only manage one location. Additional to that, many-to-many relationships are broken up as associative entities like order details in this example. Now, once we've generated the relational schema directly from our ERD, we will need to make sure that all the keys are properly defined, as well as our variable types. Do not forget the variable types. ERDPlus will automatically assign most of your variables as integer data types, which is not correct. So before you generate your SQL, do not forget to check under each entity that every attribute has the correct variable type. So for example, making sure that all categorical variables like customer ID, email, and name are all set to varchar or char variables. Variables like date should be set to date, and quantitative variables like age and score can be sent to ints, whereas if a quantitative variable needs a decimal place, like a price, we'll set those to floats or numerics. If you're confused about identifying what SQL data type should fit what variables, I will make a video on that, but please check it out in the top right if I did do that on time. Also, for the purposes of this course, do not worry about the difference between varchar and char. Just use one and use your intuition for the number of characters in the box to the right. For example, a customer's email will probably require a lot more characters than their name, so we put varchar 50 for email and varchar 20 for name. Now, once you've double checked that each variable has the correct data type and that the primary and foreign keys are correctly defined within each entity, let's generate our SQL and make sure everything matches up. And if you have done the previous 3 steps correctly, the SQL bit should boil down to double checking that all of the variables are correctly defined within the code. If you've checked that, you've essentially finished the case, and you will have completed any given database case question for COMM335. So with that, you're done. Just make sure to check your ERs, your entities, attributes, and relationships before you even start your ERD. And once you've created your ERD, check in cardinality on your RS, check your variable types, and double check in the SQL that everything is correct. And you're good. Enjoy your homework and the exam.
Bye.